Okay, so the big news story over the past couple of days has been the homicide investigation happening in Moscow. An unthinkable tragedy within the University of Idaho community. Crime is an element of this industry we don't usually cover here on the 208, but there's an element of this story that has been stoking frustration, both up in the small college town and down in the Treasure Valley, with families who have kids going to the school at the University of Idaho. The biggest component has been a lack of information coming from investigators. And here's what we do know. Just before noon on Sunday, Moscow police got a phone call, a report of an unconscious person in a house off King Road. When they got there, they found 4 U of I students dead, killed, they believe, with a knife or some sort of edged weapon. We know the FBI is now involved. We know no weapon has been found and nobody has been arrested. Nobody is in custody, yet the city and the police have said there also wasn't any threat to the Moscow community, believing this to be an isolated, targeted attack. It's that last part that has a lot of people confused and questioning how this is possible. There's apparently someone walking around willing and able to use a knife to kill 4 people, but that threat ends inside that house? The university president has told students and staff if they need to go home, they can. Their absence from class would be excused a week before Thanksgiving break. And that may have put a damper on some fears, but it hasn't helped answer many of the questions or with the frustration in trying to find them. Andrew Bartline is live in Moscow right now. And Andrew, we just wanted to talk to you today about the mood. You've been up there since yesterday, the mood in Moscow, and that can't be easy, seeing as so many took the president up on his offer of leaving town.
Yeah, and that was the first thing we saw when we pulled in. We were kind of late to the game because a lot of the stations up here covering this are in Spokane. We had a long drive to get here, and by the time we got here, people mostly had left. We did talk to a woman as she was getting out of her house, packing her car. She lives right next door. She said she was the last of her 6 roommates to leave town. She's driving one of her roommates to the airport, and then she's driving back home to Homedale, Idaho. So a lot of people in this neighborhood are gone. Campus is quiet, and we talked to students who are still here. They say that academically they feel they need to be here for their own reasons, but a lot of them said that they don't understand how these data points connect to where they're safe, but no suspect is in custody. It's a difficult data points to make sense of, Brian.
Up there, Moscow police and the city, they're not beholden to the media when it comes to what they can and can't tell us, but there are families up there with students who want to know what's going, whether their kids are safe, for those that kind of stuck behind. So what's been the difficulty in getting information from law enforcement?
Well, I mean, we've gone to the police department and tried to talk to them face to face. They say the captain's not there, who's sort of in charge of being the public information officer for this investigation. So we come to the scene and ask the people on scene, is the captain here? They say the captain's not here. And it's difficult to get a hold of him through phone call because if he's not in the office, when we're at the police department, we're certainly not answering his phone there either. There was a moment earlier today where that captain went through and called back a lot of media members and answered some questions, but a lot of the details still weren't sorted out. Really, all we got confirmed from that phone call was they are looking for a suspect, and it kind of started and stopped there. There wasn't a whole lot more other than that. I guess we do now know that the unconscious person that they originally responded to is among those 4 that are dead. We did get that confirmed as well, but that's kind of been it outside the press releases. It's been very hard to get information.
And I understand they have a job to do. We want to let them do it, but again, we feel like there's some information that we could share with the public to let them know, kind of clarify some of these, as you said, these data points that don't kind of line up. And I know this next question I have for you, Andrew, is a difficult one. Just being in that town, being part of that community, you went to school not very far from there. You've spoken with some of the friends of some of these people, or at least some people who are very connected to this. This has got to be one of the most difficult things for them and for this community.
Yeah, you said it. I went to school here. I grew up here. I mean, my whole life has been between Spokane, Sandpoint, Moscow, Pullman. You talk to the people that knew them or went to school with them. I went to college with an older sister of one of them, and I'm talking to my friends from school who are very close with the older sister, and it's tough, Brian. It's tough, and a lot of these people are really struggling to make sense of it. I got a phone call from a friend who lives in Dallas, Texas. They left Pullman, Moscow area 3 years ago. And they're gearing up, and they don't know what's happening. They're concerned, and they're asking me what's going on, and I would like to tell them. But it's tough to get that information. And again, law enforcement has a job too. We totally understand that. But the vibe around here is weird, Brian. It's weird. You walk around campus, there aren't people around. It's quiet. The few people that will talk to us, they're kind of fidgety. They're a little concerned. I said, like, they don't feel comfortable here trying to understand how these data points connect. There's no suspect in custody, but you're supposed to feel safe. Well, they don't feel safe. And it's the only thing I can compare it to was the Tyler Helinski situation at Washington State that I experienced as a student. It is very similar to that. It is very, very odd. The difference is that there's no ongoing threat in that situation, but the way people are acting, the way people are talking, it's the only other thing I could possibly compare this to from my experience.
All right, Andrew, thank you very much for what you're doing up there today and for tomorrow and what you have been doing up there. And I understand maybe we can get some more information, understand kind of how this plays out going forward. But again, thank you very, very much. And we'll keep checking in with you should things get updated or anything come through. Here's what else we seem to know about this. Well, we do know this. There are 4 families who won't be welcoming their kids home for Thanksgiving. 20-year-old Ethan Chapin from Conway, Washington. 21-year-old Madison Mogan from Coeur d'Alene. 20-year-old Xana Kernoodle from Post Falls. And 21-year-old Kaylee Gonzalez from Rathdrum were all killed in a house off King Road. Students, sorority, fraternity members, a son, and daughters. And as you heard Andrew say, we also know the Vandal community is tight and it's strong and it's spread all around this state and all around the western United States and even further. So a tragedy like this touches a lot of people. And maybe you were one of those members of those Greek houses. And maybe you lived on or near that street while you were going to school there. Or maybe you just know how something like this will leave a long-lasting and large impact on such a small college town. But there's something else you probably should know too. Again, reiterated by Andrew. There's a lot of others out there who are with you. There's a new leadership in Idaho. Not from the top down, but a lot of the top spots, we see new people in those state offices. They will see those. Secretary of State, Attorney General, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Lieutenant Governor are all in their new roles. Well, not yet, but about to be. Lieutenant Governor, that role is pretty interesting. Scott Bedke is going to transition from the longest-serving House Speaker to Idaho's #2 in command of the state. And he's going from the leader of the House to the leader of the Senate. So does new leadership mean a new direction? Well, given the results of the election and who will end up in the Senate, maybe not as much as you'd think. Joe Paris spoke with Idaho's Lieutenant Governor-elect about Idaho's political landscape, starting with what's happened in the past with the office he's about to inherit. The former tenant bringing a lot of attention to that position that mostly remained in the background. So does Scott Bedke expect a clean slate from Idahoans?
Well, I think I'll get a clean slate eventually. Obviously, we'll go in with a deficit because some of the activities, some of the actions of my predecessor, but we're not going to let that stop us. I mean, I'm going to be out and about, and we'll have a great staff in that office that will be able to interface with the public and to do the scheduling and all the research behind the issues. I don't think that we'll miss a beat. We'll see what the legislature does. It's all on them. I mean, they can fix it or they can let it ride. Whatever they choose works.
Where do you think Idaho is headed right now? We saw in the general election, Ammon Bundy get 100,000 votes. And there's 100,000 Idahoans out there that did not vote for Brad Little, but we understand they're probably leaning more conservative. You know, with that said, 17% of all voters saying that, Brad Little's not our guy. How do you consider that heading into the lieutenant governor's role and working with the governor saying there are some people that didn't vote for us, but we want to work for them too?
Well, we've always got to be doing what we think is right. By far, the largest percent of Idahoans supported Governor Little as they supported me and the other winners. I think that we take that as clear direction. I don't think there's any percentage or any good to be had by looking over your shoulder. We're just going to go do what we think is right. After we collect data, consensus, we're going to be plugged into our state, and from that input, we will go forward.
What are your thoughts on moving on from the Idaho House? You're the House Speaker, the longest running one in state history. Now you'll preside over the Senate. And there's always been the commentary that the House gets a little more wilder than the Senate. But heading into this session, I guess, what are your thoughts on the House and Senate and your new role?
Well, I look forward to getting to know a new group of people. The House was the House, and I was privileged to enjoy their confidence for the last 5 cycles, and they elected me as their speaker. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. The people elected me to be the presiding office of the of the Senate. So that's a little different. There's a little different culture there, but I don't foresee any problems in the transition. I look forward to learning a new process, and I look forward to all the new friends that I'll have there.
I know that the lieutenant governor's position is it's whatever the lieutenant governor wants to make it. You can do as little or as much as you want. One thing we have seen in the past, though, is lieutenant governors have like a passion project. Governor Little, he was really big on education. We saw that carry over into his work as governor. Do you have one area or one or two areas that will be your passion project as lieutenant governor?
Can I have two?
You can have two.
All right. I am passionate about our natural resources here in the state of Idaho and the proper use of them, particularly our water resource. We live in the arid West, and just because we're growing doesn't mean we're going to get more water. And so it's going to be incumbent upon us to conserve what we have, to make it go as far as we can, and to prepare, they say to prepare for a rainy day. We need to prepare for a drought. Second, and arguably every bit as important, is that I want to create or help create an atmosphere, a situation in Idaho where Idaho kids can always get an Idaho job. And so that's two circles working together. So you have to have a positive business climate, but you cannot have a positive business climate without having a quality education available to every kid. If there's one thing that I heard on the campaign trail, and it didn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans or everybody in between, parents and grandparents want their kids to have access to a quality education. And that spans all the whole political spectrum. So this ability to connect kids earlier in their high school experience to the labor market that is just begging for people. We need to facilitate that. We need to invest in these in-demand careers that we've talked about during this special session. So those are the two things that I can bring special passion to, but I'm pretty good at a longer list as well.
And I asked the Lieutenant Governor-elect about who he thinks should replace him as the House Speaker, and he didn't have someone to endorse, and he touched on really how competitive that whole thing can be behind the scenes. So long story short, Brian, we will find out soon. But, I was trying to find out if Mr. Bedke had somebody who would say, this guy would be a good guy to replace me. But, kind of the way it works is a little more behind the scenes. It's a caucus election, and it's a big deal. Whoever replaces Scott Bedke, it's going to be the first person to be the House Speaker in a long time here in Idaho. How will they run the show? How will that impact what happens on the floor? Time will tell.
Did you ask him if he plans to pass any or sign any executive orders while Governor Little might be out of town at some point?
I didn't ask him specifically about that, but I got at what you're getting at here. And long story short, Bedke tells me he's excited to be a team with Governor Little. And a part of the interview that didn't make our show today is he tells me that he and Governor Little went to Lewiston together as a team, and he found Bedke telling me this, he found that people liked a team, and he liked seeing, the governor and lieutenant governor working together on topics. So it definitely will be a different approach. I mean, we've talked on this show for several years now about the relationship between McGeehan and Little. I can just tell you the relationship between Bedke and Little is going to be significantly different.
Much different.
Opposite side of the spectrum.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. We'll be right back. The Leonid meteor shower began earlier this month, but is expected to peak later this week. It's called the Leonid shower because the meteors originate from the sickle of Leo, you know, the constellation up there in space. It's a pretty well-known shower, too. Under ideal conditions during the peak, you might be able to see 10 to 15 meteors an hour. That's with the naked eye. But if you're really good and you have a good camera, say a contraption with, I don't know, 7 cameras that also records and sorts out the streaks going across the sky for you, well, you might see a lot more than that. And you might just be Jordan Ragsdale from Eagle. A garage is usually a space for stuff. What is that thing? But this garage in Eagle
This is the telescope I use to capture planets,
is more of a space
so it zooms in really, really far.
for space stuff.
You got to be careful with that.
It's a tight squeeze.
Jordan Ragsdale is really into telescopes.
So this is a C14, and that indicates a 14-inch diameter.
Is that big?
It's pretty big for a telescope, yeah.
And as he said, it's good for spotting planets.
What's that one for?
This one is what was good for planets 50 years ago.
Is this a hobby, first of all?
A hobby, yes.
How much money would you say you've spent on it?
I've probably sold 10 times more than I've bought, or that I've kept, I should say. So I like to say I've broken even.
For Jordan, what he's spent wasn't really a problem. It's what he's missed.
Always when I go out to astronomy parties to stargaze, everybody goes, "Oh my God, you see that meteor?" And this is me. What? No, I missed it.
So a couple of years ago, he had an idea.
Because I have FOMO and I never want to miss something like that. I was like, I'm going to get a camera that captures every single meteor 24 hours a day. I'm never going to miss another one.
That little thing captures all that.
Oh yeah, it captures everything.
And this month, it's been especially active.
This last meteor shower where, we've got 2 or 3 different showers overlapping each other. This was a good one a couple nights ago to the south. The Leonids and also the northern Taurids have been phenomenal this year. That's the same one from a different angle
Then there was this one
from a couple nights ago.
that showed up somewhere in the middle of Oregon.
So people actually saw it from Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Idaho. Since they explode so high up in the atmosphere, usually 20, 30 miles, it's kind of low on the horizon for us, but still lights up the whole sky.
Wow.
And that's 300 miles away. Lightning doesn't do that.
But meteors do, by hitting the atmosphere and blasting into pieces.
And that energy creates all the light.
Every morning, Jordan scans what he captured over a cup of coffee.
So like hundreds a night.
But easily 100 a night. When you get to the Perseids in the summer, 500 a night.
Okay, so a big cup of coffee.
But I would say, that this system here and our light pollution with all the trees that I have, I'll capture 30,000 a year.
A big number from such a small device.
It's my meteorologist on the roof. So.
In a field where size seems to matter.
And then here's the big one.
Jordan says there are about 200 of these cameras that he has on his house around the world, including one in Glens Ferry, a sort of crowdsourcing for science kind of thing. These amateur cameras capture things actual astronomers might miss, when their telescopes are pointed at other things. Jordan also takes pictures with his big telescopes, and he often posts them on our Weather Watchers Facebook page, so check them out. All right, anniversary is usually a time to celebrate a milestone. This story is a milestone, but it's also one to reflect and honor lives lost. Continental Airlines Flight 1713, bound for Boise, crashed while taking off from Denver's old Stapleton Airport on November 15, 1987. This happened in snowy conditions. A National Transportation Safety Board investigation concluded the plane wasn't properly de-iced before they decided to take off. 28 people died. Last November, Andrew Bartline spoke with two survivors from Boise. They said a mundane decision saved their lives 35 years ago today.
It's a lost art, collecting old newspaper clippings, usually for moments you want to remember.
Just to process what had happened was pretty crazy.
But sometimes it's for a day you can never forget.
It was kind of cloudy and a little bit misty, rainy, that type of thing, and snowy. The weather wasn't very good.
It was 1987, Continental Flight 1713 from Denver to Boise. The plane wasn't fully de-iced before taking off, and it barely left the runway. 11-year-old Jennifer Allegreza was on board with her father, Tom.
The plane went up about 100 feet and turned upside down, and then it landed on its roof and crashed and then broke apart. And I yelled right away. I said, "Duck your heads, we're gonna crash."
Slid for a quarter mile upside down, and the plane is split apart. And so if you imagine that where the plane split apart was like a shovel, it was digging into the dirt at the end of the runway, and that was flying up in our face, along with snow and gravel and rocks and everything else.
The crash killed 28 people, including 3 crew members, but Jennifer and Tom walked away with minor injuries. The difference between life and death, a last-second change to their seating assignment.
I was going to do a talk at an outfitters meeting on Monday, the next day. So I wanted to sit in back with my secretaries so she could take notes and type it up for me. And so I moved everybody from the front of the plane to the back of the plane. The seats that we originally had, where the plane split apart towards the middle front, we would have been dead because they all died there.
The person that was sitting in the seat I was supposed to be in isn't here. And so there's a reason I'm here. I'm still, every day waking up trying to figure out what that is.
You can't see the scars on their body because they have none, and their minor injuries have faded. But the emotional toll, that hasn't faded in the slightest. 34 years later, those scars are fresh.
Slow motion, it's like I'm still there.
Preserved like the ink in a laminated newspaper clipping.
And the girl right in front of me died. While I was talking to her, she died. And that bothered me a lot, the most of anything.
Whew, those are some memories. Jennifer and Tom still fly, by the way, and they actually boarded a plane 2 days after that crash to get home. Today, they celebrate the anniversary each year with flowers and a big family dinner, an annual reminder to live their life with gratitude. We got several comments tonight centered on Andrew Bartline up in Moscow, reporting on the homicide that took place there over the weekend with 4 University of Idaho students killed in a home, in a house they lived in just off campus. Several comments like this one from Teresa and Filer. We wanted to share these with you. What an honest and heartfelt interview with Andrew. Great reporting, says Teresa. And then there's this one here, sending our love and support to Andrew. Broke my heart seeing him emotional this evening. Thank you for being there. Andrew, thank you for sharing your personal perspective with us. As a parent of 3 20-something college students, I can't imagine the nightmare that I imagine some of those people are going through. I just want to commend and lift Andrew. What a difficult job covering such a horrific incident when it hits close to home. I feel his emotion, as it should be. We forget journalists have feelings, like us all. Thank you, Andrew. That's Tam from Caldwell. It is one of those things. I know a lot of people just think this job is about facts and information, but it's also about perspective. It's also about emotion. And it gets to us too. We'll see you back here tomorrow.